The untamed frontier is still there, beyond the towering skylines and the windswept canyons of the city. Just past the well-manicured suburban lawns, there are forests and lakes and rivers just waiting to be explored. Nature can be calming, as any photo of the autumn foliage in New England can prove. Some people love to be near the ocean, amidst the crashing waves and the scent of salt air. And a walk through a dense forest with birds chirping above and critters rustling the leaves at our feet can remind us that we are but one small piece of a much larger puzzle. But behind the lush greenery and beneath the soothing waves, there is also danger. It can come on strong like the neck-breaking winds of a hurricane, or it can be as silent as a shark gliding through the water. Unfortunately, we rarely recognize we're in trouble until it's far too late. I'm Aaron Mahnke, and this is Lore Legends. In the middle of North Carolina, just outside of Raleigh, sits Chatham County. With a population of 76,000, it's predominantly white part of the state with a deeply problematic history, as black lynchings were common during the 19th century. It's also home to one of the most famous rivers in America, Cape Fear, which was the setting of a thriller novel by John D. MacDonald published in 1957, as well as two film adaptations in 1962 and 1991. Cape Fear River forms where the Deep River and the Haw River converge in a Y shape. It was said to have been named during the 16th century by two explorers, Sir Richard Grenville and John White, who nearly wrecked their ships on the Cape. Cape Fear flows through eastern North Carolina to the Atlantic for 191 miles and was one of the earliest economic hubs within the state. Ships would transport everything from goods to passengers along that river. In 1740, four Scotsmen from Argyllshire came to the area and planted roots. Their names were Duncan Campbell, James McLaughlin, Hector McNeil, and his brother Neil McNeil. And yes, Neil McNeil was his real name. They purchased several large tracts of land where the Deep and the Haw rivers met and built a town called Lockville. Lockville became the place to start a business, and with the influx of entrepreneurs also came a need for somewhere to grab a drink. So a man named Ambrose Ramsay, seeing that there was money to be made in this growing little burg, opened his own tavern. He called it, appropriately, Ramsay's Tavern. It was built near where the river converged, not far from the new residence and the homes that they had built. The tavern became much more than just a neighborhood bar, though. It was the most happening spot in Lockville, because it was practically the only spot in Lockville. Over time, the tavern also cemented itself as an important part of American history. The Revolutionary War brought British forces to North Carolina's shores in 1781. As they fought the Continental Army and continued to lose men, they retreated down the coast. Surviving redcoats commandeered Ramsay's Tavern and a nearby mill for a makeshift headquarters so that they could nurse their wounds and rest before resuming the fight. But the tavern's role in America's origins went far beyond being an ad hoc infirmary and a strategy room. It was also home to something else. You see, back then, one of the river's most prominent features was a big white sandbar. Late at night, after they had filled their bellies with beer and whiskey, soldiers and townsmen would stumble out of the tavern and head home, passing the area where the rivers met. And there, beneath the glow of the moonlight as the water rushed past them, they would see them perched on the sandbar, combing their hair. Mermaids. Unsurprisingly, the first mermaid sightings at the entrance to the Cape Fear River were not taken seriously. After all, who would believe a bunch of drunks heading home from the bar? But more and more people started to see the mermaids lounging outside the tavern where the waters converged. But why there? What had brought them out of the ocean and upriver? The people of Lockville believed that the briny depths of the Atlantic had been damaging to the mermaids' precious hair, so they had swum up to the river to wash out the salt. Of course, the men never saw the mermaids while they were on their way to the tavern. They were only ever visible hours later in the dark after the patrons were good and drunk. Could they have been women from town out for a swim in the river late at night? Or the hallucinations of inebriated workers after a long day at the mill? It's anybody's guess. Regardless of the truth, the people of Lockville started referring to the area as Mermaid Point, a name which it still holds to this day. Now, in Scottish lore, mermaids were seen as unlucky omens, their appearance foreshadowing some kind of death or disaster. And maybe the mermaids laughing and relaxing along the sandbar really were bad omens, because the town of Lockville, like the men emerging from the tavern in drunken stupors, couldn't stand on its own 2 feet forever. It wasn't long before the whole operation collapsed, leaving Ramses as the last vestige of a failed entrepreneurial experiment. Sadly, its proximity to the Cape Fear River proved to be its downfall. A flood in the late 1800s washed the tavern away, and with it, any remaining traces of the once booming mill town. Looking back, maybe the creatures the men saw every night really were mermaids, because anyone who got too close, whether they were business magnates, tavern owners, or intrepid explorers, all ended up the same way, drawn to Cape Fear with promises of good fortune, only to have it all swept away in the end. About 200 miles northwest of the Cape Fear River lies Lake Norman. It's nearly 34 miles long and 9 miles wide, and it covers a spread of 32,000 acres. It's not the largest nor the deepest lake in North Carolina, but it has a beauty and a character that sets it apart from the rest. It's also referred to as the state's inland sea, complete with almost 60 small islands dotting its waters. But Lake Norman wasn't always a lake. It had begun life as a river, home to the native Catawba people who had occupied the surrounding land for 6,000 years. And as usual, white settlers eventually arrived and drove the Catawba away, taking the land and the river access for themselves. Beginning in 1906, Duke Power Company installed hydroelectric dams to provide water to the region. 10 dams were created over the next 5 decades, with an 11th dam being the one to finish the river's conversion into a full-fledged lake. The nearby residents were pushed out and forced to relocate. By 1964, Duke Power Company had turned the river and 23,000 acres of the surrounding land into the largest man-made freshwater body in North Carolina. It was named Lake Norman after a former Duke Power president. But what Duke Power didn't realize was that such a massive undertaking would attract some unwanted attention from the unlikeliest of places. Over the last 30 years, Lake Norman has been the site of no fewer than 20 UFO encounters. They've been spotted flying across the area since 1968, usually over the power plant owned by Duke Energy. And they are as upset as the former residents who were driven from their homes. At least it seems so. Or maybe they're fascinated by seeing a mighty river tamed into a calm lake by human engineering. Nobody knows for sure, but these reports have made North Carolina number 4 in the country for UFO sightings. However, the sky over Lake Norman isn't the only place where unexpected phenomena have occurred. Plantations once stood on the surrounding land, and even within the lake itself prior to its flooding. The area's tumultuous history comes to life before visitors' eyes every now and then. Visitors to the area claim to have heard the sounds of children playing in the distance. The spectral bodies of enslaved people have been seen hanging from trees, ghostly remnants of the area's dark and violent past. And on some occasions, Revolutionary War soldiers charge into an endless battle for the future of a country that they'll never get to see. But aside from the phantom soldiers and the UFOs, Lake Norman's most popular resident is that of a creature many have seen. He haunts its murky waters even though he's no ghost. He propels his slender body with the help of his flippers and a tattered dorsal fin on his back, and he's known as the Lake Norman Monster. Now, the Lake Norman Monster, or Normie for short, has been described several different ways over the years. Some believe that he resembles a giant snake or eel. Others claim that he's an enormous catfish, while a few say that he's more of a Nessie-type creature. Normie sightings have only been reported over the last few decades, but they were frequent enough for one local resident, Matt Myers, to record them for posterity. He's collected over 40 reports dating back to the 1980s, many of which describe an encounter with a massive creature gliding beneath their paddleboards or bumping into their canoes. Fishermen out on the lake have felt something so big and strong catch their lines that it snapped them before vanishing into the depths. Other common reports describe enormous waves appearing in the lake on otherwise tranquil days. One scuba diver in 1980 had been 80 feet below, searching for old bottles and antiques in the buildings that had been flooded by the lake, when he came upon a house. The windows of the home were still intact, and its front porch, although collapsed, was still attached to the building. It didn't look like there was any way inside. So the diver swam around to the side of the house, where he came to a big hole, big enough to swim through, and he peered through it inside, only to stop short at the sight of a giant fish about 8 feet long with a mouth 3 feet wide. The diver just floated there, watching the fish, which didn't seem to notice him, before swimming away. One of the most descriptive encounters came from a witness named Hannah in 2011. She claimed that she'd seen a 10-foot-long snake with large scales and a mouthful of teeth swimming in the lake. Over the years, numerous theories about the creature have emerged. Some believe Normie to be nothing more than a lake sturgeon, a type of fish that can grow up to 6.5 feet long and weigh as much as 200 pounds. It's also possible that Normie could be a freshwater eel, or just a humongous catfish. Fishermen have caught large Arkansas blue catfish in the lake before, and rumors have spread concerning a human-sized catfish lurking in the waters near the dam for almost 40 years. One of the more unlikely theories is that Normie is an alligator. And although there have been no definitive gator sightings in Lake Norman, they have wandered into the banks of other nearby lakes before. But Lake Norman is not a natural lake. It's a product of industry, and so it's not out of the realm of possibility for Normie to follow suit. Hydroelectric power isn't as clean of an energy source as some might think. The coal ash produced by Duke Energy has contaminated the water to dangerous levels for residents who rely on it for their drinking water. The company tried to cover it up, but the truth came out in a 20,000-page report in 2018. If they were trying to hide the effects on the lake, what else were they hiding? And what might have their pollution done to the animals living inside it? According to one witness, their best friend's father had worked for the power plant nearby. He talked about how the contractors hired to check the underwater equipment would refuse to go down there because of the giant fish waiting for them. It sounds like something out of a horror movie, I know. A soulless corporation ruining the environment and mutating an innocent creature into a terrifying beast. But until whatever truly lies beneath the waters of Lake Norman has been officially identified, we're left with a frightening reality to swallow. Anything, it seems, is possible. Not all that slithers is cold-blooded. North Carolina's lakes and rivers aren't the only places home to mysterious and terrifying creatures. In Iredell County, north of Charlotte, a beast has been seen by hunters and farmers dating back to the late 1800s. It has been known to emerge from the woods and make off with livestock, from plump pigs to 1,500-pound cows. It leaves nothing behind but bones and footprints in the dirt, and it's called the Santer. Witnesses say the Santer is feline in appearance, with reddish or gray fur all over except for its bald head. It sees through a pair of beady eyes and moves on long, spindly legs. Its front feet are webbed, they say, and its rear feet are like bear's paws. One footprint that was found measured 8 inches long and 4 inches wide, although it was unclear whether it had come from a front or a back foot. The Santer hunts with the help of a long, beaded tail with 8 hard knots embedded throughout its length. Whenever it finds something that it would like to eat, it swings the appendage and knocks out its prey before carrying it off. And those unlucky enough to have heard its cry have described the sound as the blood-curdling wail of a human infant. Now, reports of the Santer first started appearing in the 1890s. The Statesville Landmark, a paper out of Iredell County, began tracking the creature's sightings in a series of articles that referred to it as the Glutton. A police officer from Statesville reportedly shot at the Glutton one Thursday night near the fire department. It had been chasing a dog. According to the article, its tracks were seen Friday morning in the branch below Mr. Joe Young's blacksmith shop. The following day, a hunter named John Colbert encountered the creature's tracks while squirrel hunting. He said he had never seen anything like them before in his entire life as a hunter. His hunting partner, J.W. Brown, believed them to be from a catamount, a large wild cat that used to roam throughout several eastern states and even part of Canada. Meanwhile, a man named Major Pendleton had been frying some fish at his home when the Glutton leapt from the trees and approached the house growling, his sharp teeth on display. The stories about the mysterious creature attacking people and animals throughout the county continued to pour in. Clint Summers claimed that it had eaten several of his pigs, while a Dr. Mott had lost 15 cows to the beast's hunger. But where had it come from? Rumors spread that the beast had escaped from a sideshow in Greensboro, which had offered a $200 reward for its capture and return. Although if that were true, it would have made the sideshow the only venue that wanted the Glutton kept alive. You see, everyone else in Iredell County was out for blood. A local tannery offered a $50 reward, as did the county commissioner. Speculation grew as residents and law enforcement tried to make sense of its features. Was it really a catamount, or maybe a cougar? Some people believe the Glutton to be an antelope on account of its long legs. The press eventually gave the creature its official name of Santer without any explanation of the name's origin or its meaning. From then on, that's what it was called. Another outlet, the Carolina Watchman, had a theory more in line with a monster movie than a scientific fact. It suggested that the Santer could have been an ancient creature from the Cenozoic, Mesozoic, or Paleozoic eras that had been preserved in the coal mines beneath Asheville until its accidental release. An idea that clearly has a Hollywood feel to it, I know. The legend of the Santer took a major twist in 1894 when a witness came forward with new information on its behavior. The witness had allegedly seen the Santer glowing in a luminous body, shedding its radiant light for hundreds of yards around, before turning into a black dog. Sightings continued well into the 1930s. Locals told papers all about how they'd heard animals scuffling in the middle of the night, only to find that the Santer had killed and eaten their family pets. There were even occasional claims from hunters that the beast had finally been killed. Then, when the dead animals were examined with a closer eye, they would be revealed as nothing more than common owls or raccoons. And of course, without fail, the Santer would always be seen again, reappearing a short time later to enjoy another impromptu meal. The world around us is full of dark corners, shadows that hold countless mysteries for us to whisper about. In a country as large as the United States, one that still holds countless acres of untamed wilderness, it shouldn't be a surprise that the hills and forests are populated with creatures that sound more like fiction than fact. Folklore is one of the things that humans do best. We love to answer mysteries with stories of our own invention. We love to explain the unexplainable with tales that delight and thrill. And when it comes to the monsters of North Carolina, they fit that trend perfectly. And of course, it wasn't uncommon for the newspapers at the time to fabricate sensational stories to boost their sales. Most of the reporting on the Santer was done by the Statesville Landmark, so it was possible that they had invented the creature and the folklore had taken on a life of its own right after. But that doesn't explain how a similar creature wreaked very real havoc in North Carolina in the 1950s. It began in December of 1954 in the town of Bladenboro, about 40 miles south of Fayetteville. A string of animal killings had gripped the local residents with fear after a farmer had spotted a cat-like creature snatching his dog and dragging it into the underbrush. Pretty soon, other dogs went missing too. They were found later, dead, with all their blood drained and their heads crushed in. A month later, a woman named Mrs. Kinlaw went outside around 7:30 in the morning and saw a giant cat-like monster heading toward her. She fled into her house and told her husband, who fetched his shotgun and ran outside. But by the time he got there, whatever it was had disappeared. Hogs, cows, and goats started turning up dead shortly after that, and the common description given of the unholy beast that had done it, it had reddish-brown fur and made a high-pitched whine like the cry of a human infant. A mob of 800 people formed a hunting party and went in search of the creature. All they managed to kill was a bobcat, though, but based on its size, they were not convinced it had committed those heinous acts on all those dogs and livestock. What it was, we'll never know, because to this day, the beast of Bladenboro has never been found. North Carolina is a big state with even bigger legends, and we're not quite done telling you all about them. We followed the trail of one more creature from the Tar Heel State, and if you stick around through this brief sponsor break, I'll tell you all about it. The Santer and the Beast of Bladenboro aren't the only cat monsters stalking parts of North Carolina. Among the mountains and dense brush is another animal, one that has captivated an entire region for hundreds of years. Its name? The Wampus Cat. The Wampus Cat is actually one of the few cryptids that has been known to extend beyond the area of the country. The Wampus Cat is ubiquitous throughout the South and Appalachia, with multiple high schools using it as their mascot. It's also known as the Galliwampus in Missouri and the Whistling Wampus in Arkansas, and simply the Wampus in Appalachia. Its ferocity is specific to its location, too. Some places fear the Wampus Cat as they do the Santer, while others treat it with a tongue-in-cheek playfulness. The North Carolina Wampus Cat, though, has been described as a half-cat, half-dog creature capable of running on all fours or upright on its hind two legs. It stalks its prey at night and lets out a terrifying howl. Its eyes have been known to either glow yellow or green, and their soul-piercing gaze has driven people mad. Those who have encountered the Wampus Cat have usually done so by accident, after wandering into a labyrinthian swamp on their way back to camp. R.S. McNeil, a writer for the outdoor periodical Field and Stream, once wrote, "The trail of a Wampus Cat is invariably marked with torn and uprooted trees, mangled brush, and tufts of bloody fur. Too much emphasis cannot be laid on the deadly nature of this animal." The author went on to say that even a stuffed and mounted Wampus Cat was capable of tearing its owner apart. Okay, sure. It was believed that the Wampus Cat had derived from Cherokee legends, although some experts claim that the stories had not originated with the Cherokee people at all. Rather, they had been told by settlers about the Cherokee. In 1939, a version of the Wampus Cat appeared in a book by Henry H. Tryon called Fearsome Critters, and rather than depict a feral, murderous cat-like hellbeast, Tryon's idea was more whimsical and imaginative. He described the Wampus Cat as having tufted ears and a quilled hide that was color akin to a Christmas necktie. That's the quote, really. And as if that weren't a mental picture that was cute enough, Tryon also peppered his lore with factoids like, if a wampus wades into a stream, the fish won't bite for 7 days. And also, females may be killed only with a crosscut saw. The males, practically indestructible. He also wrote that their footprints can only be seen in solid rock. Meanwhile, a white folktale told of an old man who stepped outside one day and saw a Wampus Cat sitting on his chimney top. He looked up and asked what its shiny eyes were for, and the Wampus answered him, "To look you through." The man then asked what its sharp claws were for. "To scratch your grave," said the creature. "And the long tail?" the man asked. "To sweep your grave," the Wampus Cat said. So the old man then asked one last question. "What are those sharp teeth for?" The Wampus looked down at him. "To chop your bones," it cried, as it pounced down upon him. And just as with the Santer, the Wampus Cat was said to have been killing livestock since the first half of the 19th century through to the present. Everyone from farmers to television hosts have reported seeing its glowing eyes and razor-like teeth. So, were those creatures really prowling the North Carolina wilderness and eating livestock with wild abandon, or were they simply stories told to scare children and drive up newspaper sales? No one knows for sure, but clearly, North Carolina is the state where we might find the answers. But if you go looking, just be careful. You might not like what you find. As always, folks, thanks so much for watching. Credits for today's episode are in the description below. Lore has been a podcast since 2015 with over 400 million downloads to date. You can learn more about this show, plus the book series and television adaptation over at lorepodcast.com. And of course, be sure to click on the subscribe button and the bell icon so that you don't miss future episodes. Oh, and if you enjoyed this one, give it a thumbs up too. And you can also follow this show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Just search for Lore Podcast, all one word, and then click that follow button. And when you do, say hi. I like it when people say hi. And as always, thanks for watching.